The blood dripped from the parchment onto the marble floor of the high court as Lord Cassius Thornwood watched the crimson spread like accusation itself. His ancient heart, which had not truly beaten in 3 centuries, suddenly thundering against his ribs with a force that made the chandeliers tremble. Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The results are incontrovertible, Lord Thornwood, announced Magistrate Ilara Brightstone, her voice carrying through the vaulted chamber like a death knell. She held the document at arm's length as though the truth it contained might burn her immortal flesh. The girl shares 99.7% of your genetic markers. By both human and vampire law, she is your daughter. Cassius' fingers, pale as moonlight and twice as cold, gripped the armrests of his obsidian throne. Around him, the assembled nobility of the Eternal Court gasped and whispered, their voices creating a susurrus that sounded like wind through a graveyard. For the first time in living memory, the most powerful vampire lord in the Western Territories appeared genuinely shaken. At the center of the courtroom, standing in a pool of lamplight that seemed designed to expose rather than illuminate, a young woman trembled. Her name was Elise Mercier, and until 3 months ago, she had believed herself to be fully human. The orphaned daughter of a seamstress raised in the charity houses of St. Catherine's Parish, destined for a life of modest obscurity. Now she stood accused of being something impossible. Cassius finally rose from his throne, his movements fluid despite the shock that seemed to have turned his very bones to lead. He was magnificent in his fury, tall and broad-shouldered, with hair the color of a raven's wing and eyes that shifted between gray and silver depending on his mood. Tonight, they were the color of storm clouds gathering before a tempest. "This is preposterous," he said, each word measured and cold. "I have sired no children. In 347 years, I have been meticulous about such matters. The vampire bloodline does not propagate easily, and I have—" He stopped abruptly, his jaw tightening. "This test is either contaminated or fabricated." "My lord," Elise said, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying through the massive chamber. "I did not seek this. I did not want this." It was true. 3 months earlier, Elise had been working in the household of Countess Marguerite Devereux, a minor vampire noble who collected human servants the way others collected porcelain dolls. It had been steady work, if humiliating. Vampires paid well for discretion and blood donations, and Elise had needed the money to pay for her younger brother's medical treatments. Then had come the night when everything changed. She had been cleaning the Countess's private study when she'd accidentally knocked over an ancient ledger. The pages had scattered across the floor, and as she'd gathered them, her eyes had caught on a name she recognized. Catherine Mercier. Her mother's name. The entry had been brief but devastating. Catherine Mercier, human servant, dismissed after bearing a hybrid child. Contract terminated. Subject relocated. Compensation, 50 gold sovereigns and magical binding to ensure silence. Elise's hands had shaken as she'd read the next line. Father, Lord Cassius Thornwood. Child, female. Born 1803. Status, unknown. The year of Elise's birth. When Countess Devereux had discovered Elise reading the forbidden ledger, she might have killed the girl outright. Instead, driven by her own ancient rivalry with Lord Thornwood, she had done something far more dangerous. She had brought Elise before the High Court and demanded a formal blood test. Now, standing in the aftermath of that test's results, Elise felt the weight of hundreds of immortal gazes upon her. Some were curious, others hostile. All were hungry for scandal. Cassius descended from his throne, each step echoing like a judge's gavel. He approached Elise with the wariness of a predator circling something it didn't quite understand. "Look at me," he commanded. Elise raised her eyes, though every instinct screamed at her to lower them, to show submission to this creature who could end her life with a thought. What she saw in his face surprised her. Not just anger, but fear. Deep, existential fear. "If you are truly my daughter," Cassius said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "then you are an abomination that should never have existed. Hybrid children rarely survive infancy, and those that do—" He trailed off, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You have her eyes. Catherine's eyes." The name of her mother on his lips felt like a violation and a benediction all at once. "You remember her?" Elise asked. Something flickered across Cassius's face. Was it regret? But it vanished so quickly that Elise wondered if she had imagined it. "The court demands a decision, Lord Thornwood," called out another voice. This belonged to Duke Armand Blackwell, a vampire lord whose territories bordered Cassius's own, and whose ambitions were poorly concealed. "Will you acknowledge the girl or denounce her?" It was a trap, and everyone in the chamber knew it. If Cassius acknowledged Elise, he would be admitting to a relationship with a human servant, a practice looked down upon by the old families, despite its commonality. He would also be accepting responsibility for a hybrid, creatures who were notoriously unstable and dangerous. The vampire community feared them because their dual nature made them unpredictable. Too human to be controlled by vampire hierarchy, too vampire to be satisfied with human limitations. But if Cassius denounced her, the DNA evidence would make him appear either a liar or a coward. His enemies would pounce on the perceived weakness. "I require time," Cassius finally said, his voice ringing with authority that made several younger vampires flinch. "This matter involves complexities that cannot be resolved in a single night. I invoke the right of investigation under the ancient protocols." Magistrate Brightstone nodded slowly. "Granted. You have one lunar cycle to conduct your investigation. At the next full moon, you will present your findings and your decision to the court." She turned her ageless gaze to Elise. "Until then, the girl will remain in your custody, Lord Thornwood. She is your responsibility, whether you acknowledge her or not." The pronouncement sent another wave of whispers through the assembled crowd. Elise felt her legs go weak. Custody? She was to live with this man, this creature, who looked at her as though she were a puzzle he longed to destroy rather than solve? Cassius's expression revealed nothing, but when he spoke, his words were edged with barely controlled rage. "Very well. Let it be recorded that I accept this burden under protest." Burden. The word struck Elise like a physical blow. "The court is adjourned," Magistrate Brightstone announced, striking her staff against the floor 3 times. As the nobles began to file out, their conversations already turning to speculation and schemes, Cassius turned to Elise with eyes that had gone completely silver, the color, she would later learn, of a vampire barely maintaining control. "Come," he said simply, "we have much to discuss, girl. My name is Elise. I am well aware. I read the report. He began walking toward a side exit, clearly expecting her to follow. But until I decide whether you are truly my daughter or an elaborate fraud, you will forgive me if I maintain some emotional distance. Elise hurried after him, her worn shoes clicking against the marble in a rhythm that seemed to emphasize how out of place she was in this world of immortals and intrigue. "I have a life," she protested, "a brother who depends on me. I cannot simply—" "Your brother will be seen to," Cassius interrupted without slowing his pace. "I have already dispatched funds and a healer to attend to his medical needs. He will be moved to a private facility where he will receive the finest care available." The casual wealth in that statement, the ability to upend lives with a simple command, made Elise's head spin. "Why would you do that if you don't believe I'm your daughter?" Cassius stopped so abruptly that Elise nearly collided with him. He turned, and for the first time, she saw something other than coldness in his expression. It might have been pain. "Because if there is even the smallest possibility that you carry my blood," he said quietly, "then I have already failed you in ways that cannot be calculated. The least I can do is ensure that your family does not suffer further while we unravel this mystery." They emerged from the court building into the cool night air. The city of Nocturne spread before them, a place where vampires and humans coexisted in a delicate balance maintained by ancient laws and newer treaties. Gas lamps flickered along cobblestone streets, and in the distance, Elise could hear the sounds of the night markets opening, where vampires shopped for blood donations from willing humans, and humans sought the vampire-blessed goods that could only be created by immortal craftsmen. A carriage waited, black lacquer gleaming in the lamplight, pulled by horses whose eyes shone with an unnatural red tint. Vampire-bred steeds, then, capable of moving at speeds no mortal animal could match. "In," Cassius commanded, opening the door. Elise hesitated. Once she entered that carriage, she would be leaving behind everything familiar. The charity house might have been cold, and the work at the Countess's mansion degrading, but at least she had understood the rules. This new world of blood tests and ancient protocols, of lords and courts and impossible parentage, it terrified her. "I understand your fear," Cassius said, his voice losing some of its harsh edge. "But you must understand mine as well. If you are what that test claims, you represent a threat, not just to me, but to the careful balance we have maintained between our species. Hybrid children." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "They have started wars, girl. They have toppled kingdoms. Their very existence challenges everything we believe about the separation between vampire and human." "I didn't ask to be born," Elise said, and was mortified to hear her voice crack. "No," Cassius agreed, "none of us do. But we must live with the consequences nonetheless." He gestured to the carriage again. "Please, I give you my word that you will not be harmed while under my roof. Whatever else I may be, I honor my promises." There was something in his tone, a weariness perhaps, or a loneliness that spanned centuries, that made Elise believe him. She climbed into the carriage. The interior was luxurious beyond anything she had ever experienced. Velvet seats, silver fixtures, curtains that looked like spun shadow. Cassius settled across from her, his posture relaxed, but his eyes never leaving her face. As the carriage lurched into motion, moving at a speed that made Elise's stomach flip, Cassius spoke again. "Tell me about your mother. Everything you remember." Elise closed her eyes, reaching for memories that had faded like old photographs. "She died when I was 7. Fever," the doctor said, "though I remember—" She paused, frowning. I remember her telling me that some fevers burn away old magic, make way for new truths. I didn't understand what she meant. Cassius's expression darkened. The binding, the magical silence that was placed on her. Breaking such magic exacts a terrible price. If she spoke of what happened between us, if she tried to reveal my name or warn you. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung heavy in the air. You killed her, Elise said flatly. Your magic killed my mother. I did not place the binding, Cassius said, but there was no absolution in the words. The court requires such measures when relationships between vampires and humans produce complications. But you are correct, in essence. The magic that silenced her was invoked in my name, with my consent. I am culpable. The admission surprised Elise. She had expected denials, not this stark honesty. Did you love her? The question escaped before she could stop it. Cassius turned to look out the window, his profile sharp against the passing lights of the city. I loved what she represented. Freedom from duty, from the endless politics and power games of the court. She was kind, genuine, mortal, so beautifully, terrifyingly mortal. Every moment with her was precious because I knew it would end. He was quiet for a long moment. But love in the way you mean it? I don't know. Vampires love differently than humans. We have too much time, too much experience. Our emotions are diluted by centuries. That sounds lonely, Elise said. He looked at her sharply, as though she had surprised him again. Yes, he finally said, it is. The carriage began to slow, and Elise peered out to see that they were approaching a massive estate on the outskirts of the city. The Thornwood Manor rose against the night sky like a cathedral of shadows, all Gothic spires and ivy-covered walls. Gargoyles perched on the corners, their stone eyes seeming to track the carriage's approach. This is your home? Elise asked. One of them. I have holdings across 3 continents. He said it without boasting, merely stating a fact. But this is where I spend most of my time. It will be your home now as well, for the next month at least. The carriage stopped before massive oak doors. A butler appeared, vampire, judging by the inhuman grace of his movements, and opened the carriage door with a deep bow. Welcome home, my lord. I have prepared the east wing as requested. Thank you, Marcus. Cassius descended from the carriage and, after a moment's hesitation, offered his hand to help Elise down. His touch was cold, but not unpleasant. It reminded Elise of marble warmed by moonlight, still cool, but holding the memory of something warm. Inside, the manor was even more impressive. Grand staircases swept upward into shadow, while paintings that looked like old masters covered the walls. Elise recognized none of the subjects, but something about their eyes, a certain intensity, a knowing quality, suggested they were all vampires, captured in moments of their endless lives. You will have your own suite, Cassius said, leading her up the main staircase. Private quarters, a study, access to the library. You may move freely throughout the manor during night hours, but I must ask that you remain in your rooms during the day. My household staff are all vampires, and they rest when the sun is high. It would not be safe for you to wander alone. Am I a prisoner? Elise asked. You are a guest with limitations, Cassius replied. Tomorrow night we will begin the investigation in earnest. I have questions that need answers, and you, whether you realize it or not, are the key to a mystery that has haunted me for over 20 years. He stopped before a set of double doors and pushed them open. The suite beyond was larger than the entire charity house where Elise had been raised. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, while floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over gardens that seemed to glow with strange, luminescent flowers. There is a wardrobe with clothing that should fit you, Cassius said. a bell pull to summon servants if you need anything, and he crossed to a small table and picked up a leather-bound journal. This belonged to your mother. I kept it after she left. I don't know why. Perhaps some part of me knew this day would come. He held it out to Elise, and when she took it, their fingers brushed. For just an instant, she felt something, a spark, a connection, like two pieces of music finding harmony. Cassius pulled away as though burned. "Read it," he said, his voice rough. "Perhaps it will answer some of your questions, or perhaps it will only create more." He turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. "Elise," he said, using her name for the first time, "I want you to understand something. If you are truly my daughter, if that test is accurate, then you are in more danger than you can possibly imagine. There are factions within the court who would see you dead simply for existing. Duke Blackwell was only the most obvious. Others will be more subtle, more dangerous." "Then why not just denounce me?" Elise asked. "Tell them the test was wrong. Send me away." Cassius's smile was sad and ancient. "Because I looked into your eyes tonight, and I saw Catherine looking back at me. And because the possibility that I have a daughter, that some part of what Catherine and I shared created something new and living, is both the most terrifying and the most wonderful thing to happen to me in 3 centuries." He gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. "Sleep well, Elise. Tomorrow we hunt for truth." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Elise alone in her golden cage. She moved to the bed and sat, still clutching her mother's journal. The leather was worn smooth with age, and when she opened it, she saw her mother's familiar handwriting, neat and careful, the script of someone who had valued education despite having little access to it. The first entry was dated 24 years ago. He doesn't know I'm writing this. Lord Thornwood, Cassius, though I'm not supposed to call him that, believes servants cannot read or write. But my mother taught me before she died, secret lessons by candlelight. She said knowledge was the only thing the nobility couldn't take from us. I don't know why I'm recording this, perhaps because what's happening feels too large, too impossible to be real. A vampire lord doesn't notice a human servant. We're furniture to them, useful and forgettable. But he noticed me. Elise read on, her mother's words painting a picture of a forbidden romance that had bloomed in shadows and stolen moments. Catherine had been assigned to Lord Thornwood's household as a cleaner, invisible and unimportant. But Cassius had been different from other vampire lords. He had spoken to her, asked her opinions, treated her as though her thoughts mattered. He says I remind him of what it was like to be human, though it's been so long he can barely remember. I told him I can remind him of other things too, and he laughed, actually laughed. I don't think the lord of this manor has laughed in decades. The entries chronicled a relationship that had grown from friendship to something deeper. Catherine had known it was forbidden, dangerous, but she had loved him anyway, and he, in his way, had loved her back. Then came the entry that made Elise's breath catch. I'm pregnant. I haven't told him yet. I don't know how. Hybrid children are myths, things that don't happen anymore. The magic that separates our species is supposed to prevent this. But I feel her inside me, a daughter. I don't know how I know, but I do. She's already strong, already fighting to exist in a world that will hate her for it. I need to leave before he finds out. If the court discovers this, they'll kill us both. They'll kill our baby before she's even born. The later entries were sporadic, written in haste and fear. Catherine had fled the manor, taking the 50 gold sovereigns that Cassius had given her as severance, though he hadn't known the real reason for her departure. She had given birth in secret in a charity house far from Nocturne, where the magical wards were weak enough that the pregnancy wouldn't be detected by the court's monitors. "She's perfect," Catherine had written after Elise's birth. "She has his eyes, that silver gray that changes with the light. But she cries like a human baby, needs milk like a human baby. Maybe that's enough. Maybe she can pass for normal." The final entry, written months before Catherine's death, was different in tone. "The binding is killing me. I can feel it burning through my veins whenever I think about telling Elise the truth. But she deserves to know. She deserves to understand why she's always felt different, why she heals faster than other children, why she can see in the dark. If you're reading this, my darling girl, know that I loved you more than life. And know that your father, despite everything, despite the danger and the impossibility of what we created, would have loved you too, if he had known. I see it in my dreams, the way he would have looked at you. Terrified, amazed, proud. Find him, Elise. When you're strong enough, when you're ready, find Cassius Thornwood and show him what we made. Show him that love, even impossible, forbidden love, can create miracles." Elise closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. She had spent her entire life believing she was ordinary, believing her mother had been ordinary. But Catherine had been extraordinary, brave enough to love where love was forbidden, strong enough to protect her daughter, even as that protection killed her. A knock at the door startled Elise from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, wiping at her eyes. Marcus, the vampire butler, entered with a tray bearing tea and small sandwiches. "Lord Thornwood thought you might be hungry, miss. It's been a trying evening." "Thank you." Elise accepted the tray, grateful for something to occupy her hands. Marcus hesitated at the door. "If I may say, miss, I knew your mother. She worked here for 2 years before she left. She was kind to me when kindness was rare in this household. I'm glad you've come home." "This isn't my home," Elise said automatically. The butler's smile was gentle. "Isn't it? You were conceived here, in this very manor. Your mother's heart remained here long after she left. And now you're here, where you were always meant to be." He bowed slightly. "Ring if you need anything, miss. Welcome to Thornwood Manor." After he left, Elise moved to the windows and looked out over the gardens. The luminescent flowers, night-blooming jasmine crossed with vampire magic, she would later learn, cast their pale glow across paths that wound through topiary and fountains. Somewhere in this vast estate, Cassius was having his own reckoning with the past. Elise wondered if he was reading a journal too, or if vampires kept their memories in other ways. Did he dream of her mother? Did 300 years of life leave room for such tender recollections? She pressed her hand against the cool glass and made a silent promise to Catherine's ghost. She would find the truth, whatever it took. She would prove that she was Cassius's daughter, not to claim inheritance or power, but to honor the love that had created her. And if that truth destroyed them both, well, at least it would be honest. Below in the gardens, a figure moved through the shadows. Elise's enhanced vision, a gift she hadn't known was vampiric heritage, allowed her to see Cassius standing among the flowers, his face turned up toward her window. Even from this distance, she could sense his turmoil, his fear, his hope. The next full moon was 29 days away. 29 days to unravel a mystery that had been buried for more than 2 decades. 29 days for a vampire lord and his alleged daughter to learn whether they could be family or whether the revelation would tear them both apart. Elise pulled the curtains closed and prepared for bed, though she knew sleep would be elusive. Tomorrow, the investigation would begin in earnest. Tomorrow, she would start learning what it meant to be a hybrid, to be caught between two worlds that despised each other. Tomorrow, she would start learning what it meant to be the daughter of Lord Cassius Thornwood. But tonight, alone in her gilded room, she was simply Elise Mercier, orphaned seamstress, devoted sister, and a young woman holding her dead mother's journal like a talisman against the darkness. The moon rose higher outside her window, and somewhere in the city, the vampire court already plotted and schemed, eager to see how this scandal would unfold. The game, as Magistrate Brightstone might say, had only just begun. The next evening, Elise woke to find that her sense of time had shifted. She had slept through the entire day without meaning to, a deep, dreamless sleep that left her feeling both rested and disoriented. The sun had set hours ago, judging by the darkness beyond her windows. A servant, human this time, a young woman named Petra, had left a note on her breakfast tray. Lord Thornwood requests your presence in the East Library at 9th bell. Appropriate attire has been provided in the wardrobe. Elise discovered that appropriate attire meant a dress of deep burgundy silk, far finer than anything she had ever worn. It fit perfectly, which should have been impossible, unless Cassius had servants skilled in magical tailoring, or unless he had somehow known her measurements from observation alone. Both possibilities unsettled her. The East Library proved to be a cathedral of books, shelves stretched 2 stories high, accessible by rolling ladders and spiral staircases. The smell of old leather and ancient paper filled the air, along with something else, a scent like ozone and roses that Elise would come to recognize as concentrated vampire magic. Cassius stood at a central table, surrounded by open tomes and scrolls. He had changed from his formal court attire into something simpler, black trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with scars that looked like they had been made by silver weapons. His hair was slightly disheveled, as though he had been running his hands through it in frustration. "You're late," he said, without looking up. "I wasn't given a clock," Elise replied, matching his tone. That earned her a glance and the ghost of a smile. "Fair enough. Come here. I want to show you something." Elise approached the table and saw that the books were all genealogies, massive volumes tracking vampire bloodlines back hundreds of years. One scroll, unfurled across the center of the table, appeared to be a family tree of staggering complexity. "This is the Thornwood lineage," Cassius explained, tracing lines with one finger. "I am here, born in 1678, to Lord Edmund Thornwood and Lady Isadora of House Crimson. I had 2 brothers, both dead now, 3 sisters, one of whom still lives in Vienna. No children, no heirs. The bloodline was supposed to end with me." "Why?" Elise asked. Cassius looked at her fully then, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes, the weariness of centuries. "Because I chose it. After I was turned, after I watched my human family age and die while I remained frozen in time, I swore I would never create that pain for anyone else. No children who would have to watch me remain unchanged. No legacy that would bind me to an endless future." He picked up another book, this one bound in what looked like human skin. Elise suppressed a shudder. "This is the Codex Hybrida," Cassius continued, "a record of every known hybrid birth in the last 1,000 years. There are 47 documented cases." "Do you know how many survive to adulthood?" "How many?" 3. He let the number hang in the air. 3 hybrids in 1,000 years who lived past their 20th year. The rest died of complications, their dual nature tearing them apart from the inside, or murdered by vampires who feared them, or hunted by humans who saw them as monsters. Elise felt cold despite the warmth of the room. What happened to the 3 who survived? Cassius' expression grew grim. One became the basis for the Treaty of Shadows, the agreement that now governs vampire-human relations. She was so powerful that both species feared her, and they joined forces to imprison her in magical stasis. She sleeps still, in a vault beneath the Vatican. The second went mad from the conflicting magics in his blood and slaughtered an entire village before the Hunters Guild put him down. The third, Cassius paused, his jaw tightening. The third was my mother. Elise stared at him in shock. What? You wonder why you exist when the magic should have prevented it? Cassius laughed bitterly. It's in my bloodline. My mother was born human, daughter of a merchant. My father, my vampire father, should never have been able to sire children with her. But he did, and she survived the transformation of pregnancy to become something new, something that could bridge both worlds. She chose to be turned fully vampire after my siblings and I were born. She couldn't bear the aging, knowing she would die while her children lived on. But the hybrid nature passed to us, diluted but present. We can sire children more easily than pureblood vampires. We're more connected to our humanity, for better and worse. He moved to a window, staring out at the night. I never told anyone. My mother made us swear to keep it secret. The court fears hybrid blood, even diluted. If they knew, they would see you as less pure, Elise finished. Less legitimate. Yes, Cassius turned back to her. And now you understand the true depth of the danger we're in. If you are my daughter, you carry hybrid blood twice over. Once from me, once from your own mixed heritage. You should be impossible. You should be dead. The fact that you're standing here, healthy and whole, and 23 years old, he shook his head. It defies everything we know about hybrid biology. Elise moved to the table, studying the genealogies with new eyes. So, what do? We prove it definitively, Cassius said. The DNA test convinced the court, but I need to understand how you survived. I need to know what you're capable of, what dangers you might face. And he hesitated, vulnerability flashing across his face. I need to know if Catherine told you anything else, any detail about her time here, about us, about why she really left. Elise thought about the journal, about her mother's words. She loved you, she said quietly. She wrote about you in her journal, about how you made her feel seen, valued. She said you were different from other vampire lords. Cassius closed his eyes briefly. I should have known she was pregnant. I should have sensed it. But I was distracted by court politics, by challenges to my territory. By the time I realized she was gone, it had been months. I sent people to look for her, but the magical binding prevented her from being traced. I thought, his voice roughened, I thought perhaps she had simply grown tired of me, that the reality of being with a vampire had become too much. She was protecting me, Elise said. She knew the court would kill a hybrid baby. She was right. Cassius opened his eyes, and they were silver with emotion. They would have. They likely still will, if we cannot prove that you pose no threat. A knock at the library door interrupted them. Marcus entered, his expression troubled. My lord, you have visitors. Duke Blackwell and his entourage. They demand an audience. Cassius's face hardened. Of course they do. The vultures circle quickly. He looked at Elise. Stay here. Do not come out, no matter what you hear. What does he want? Elise asked. To test my resolve. To see if you can be used against me. Cassius moved toward the door, then paused. There's a hidden passage behind the bookshelf in the northeast corner. If something goes wrong, if you hear fighting, use it. The passage leads to the stables. Take a horse and ride for the city. Find Magistrate Brightstone. She's rigid but fair. She'll protect you until I can resolve the situation. I'm not leaving you, Elise protested. Cassius's smile was fierce and proud, spoken like a thornwood. But this is not your fight, not yet. Let me handle Blackwell. He left, and Elise heard his footsteps echoing down the corridor, each step measured and deliberate. Then voices, muffled but angry, drifting up from the main hall. Elise moved to the hidden passage Cassius had indicated, finding the mechanism that would open it. But instead of fleeing, she positioned herself where she could hear the conversation below while remaining hidden. "Presumption, coming to my home uninvited," Cassius was saying, his voice cold and commanding. "We came as concerned members of the court," Duke Blackwell replied, his tone oily and false. "You have taken custody of a hybrid, Thornwood. The court has a right to ensure she's being properly contained. She's not a prisoner. She's a young woman who deserves the chance to understand her heritage." "Her heritage?" Another voice, female and sharp. "Her heritage is an abomination. She should have been put down the moment the test results were revealed." "Careful, Baroness Thorn," Cassius said softly. "You speak of my potential daughter." "Ah, but you haven't acknowledged her, have you?" Blackwell again, triumphant. "You invoked the right of investigation, which means you have doubts, which means there's room for alternative solutions." "What are you proposing?" Cassius's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Let us examine the girl," Blackwell said. "Let our physicians run their own tests, verify the results. If she's truly your daughter, you lose nothing by allowing it. If she's not, if this is some elaborate fraud, then we can put the matter to rest permanently." Elise's heart hammered. She understood what Blackwell was really asking for: access to her, alone and vulnerable, so he could make her disappear and blame it on medical complications. "No," Cassius said flatly. "No," Blackwell's voice rose. "You would deny the court's right to verify?" "I said no, Blackwell. You may question my authority, you may scheme against my position, but you will not touch her. She remains under my protection until the investigation is complete." "Protection?" the Baroness laughed. "She's made you soft, Thornwood. 300 years of ruthless leadership, and now you play nursemaid to a human girl who claims to be your bastard." The sound of something breaking, glass perhaps, echoed through the hall. When Cassius spoke again, his voice carried the weight of true vampiric power, the kind that could compel obedience through sheer force of will. "Get out of my home." There was a moment of tense silence, then footsteps retreating. But Blackwell's voice carried one last time. "You have 28 days, Thornwood. 28 days to decide if she's worth destroying everything you've built. I wonder if even you know the answer to that question." The front doors slammed shut with enough force to rattle the windows. Elise waited several minutes before emerging from her hiding spot. When she descended to the main hall, she found Cassius standing amid the wreckage of what had been an expensive vase, his hands clenched at his sides, his eyes still blazing silver. "I told you to stay hidden," he said without turning around. "I did. I just listened from a better vantage point." Elise approached carefully, as one might approach a wild animal. "You didn't have to do that." "You didn't have to protect me." "Yes, I did." Cassius finally looked at her, and the raw emotion in his face made her breath catch. "Because whether the blood test is accurate or not, whether you're truly my daughter or the most elaborate fraud in history, you are under my protection, and I do not surrender what is mine." The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, Elise felt something warm unfurl in her chest, a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. "What do we do now?" she asked. Cassius ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up at odd angles. It made him look younger, more human. "Now we accelerate the investigation. Blackwell won't wait the full month. He'll make his move sooner. We need answers before he forces our hand." He moved to a side table and poured himself a glass of deep red liquid from a crystal decanter. Blood, Elise realized with a start. Fresh blood, kept warm by magic. "I need to run a test," Cassius said, downing the blood in one swallow. "It will be uncomfortable, possibly painful, but it's the only way to know for certain what you're capable of." "What kind of test?" "A magical resonance scan. It will show me the exact nature of your hybrid heritage, how much vampire, how much human, how the two magics interact in your blood. It's invasive, and it requires—" he hesitated. "It requires blood exchange." Elise understood immediately. "You need to bite me. And you need to taste my blood in return. It's the only way to create a complete circuit for the magic." Cassius set down the glass, his expression carefully neutral. "I wouldn't ask if there was any other option. But this will tell us everything we need to know. It will show me whether you're truly mine, and it will show you the full extent of your abilities." The idea should have terrified her. Every human child in Nocturne grew up hearing warnings about vampire bites, about the addiction that could follow, the way vampire venom could enslave a mortal will. But Elise thought about her mother's journal, about Catherine's fierce love and braver choices. "All right," she said. "How do we do this?" Cassius looked surprised, then approving. "You're braver than I gave you credit for." He gestured to a sitting room off the main hall. "In there. We'll need privacy and comfort. The scan can take several hours." The sitting room was intimate, furnished with deep couches and a fireplace that crackled with flames the color of emeralds, vampire fire, burning cold instead of hot. Cassius locked the door and drew the curtains, sealing them into a cocoon of privacy. "Sit," he instructed, indicating one of the couches. Elise sat, her heart racing. Cassius settled beside her, close enough that she could feel the chill radiating from his skin. "I'm going to explain exactly what will happen," he said, his voice falling into a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. "First, I'll bite your wrist, not your neck, despite what the stories say. The wrist has smaller blood vessels, less risk of complications. You'll feel pain initially, then euphoria as the venom takes effect. That's normal, don't fight it. While I'm drinking, you'll take blood from me. I'll cut my palm and you'll drink directly from the wound. Vampire blood tastes like lightning and wine, I'm told. It will burn going down, but don't stop. You need to take at least 3 swallows for the circuit to complete. Once the exchange is done, our magics will connect. I'll be able to see into your very essence, read the story written in your cells. And you," he paused, "you'll see into me as well. My memories, my nature, everything I am. There will be no secrets between us after this." "Everything?" Elise whispered. "Everything," Cassius confirmed. "You'll see how I've lived for 300 years. The good, the terrible, the shameful. You'll see what I did to survive, to gain power, to maintain my position. You'll see every person I've killed, every oath I've broken, every moment of weakness and strength." His jaw tightened. "You'll see your mother through my eyes. You'll know exactly what I felt for her, whether it was love or merely fascination." The vulnerability in that admission was staggering. Cassius was offering her complete access to himself, holding nothing back. "And you'll see me," Elise said. "My human weakness, my fear, my whole ordinary life." "There is nothing ordinary about you," Cassius said quietly. "I've already seen that much. But yes, I'll see everything. Your memories, your dreams, your secrets. The resonance scan strips away all pretense. He held out his hand. Are you certain you want this? Elise thought about running, about fleeing back to her simple life, where the most complicated decision was which dress to mend first. But that life was gone the moment she'd picked up that ledger in the Countess's study. There was only forward now, into truth and consequences. She placed her hand in his. I'm certain. Cassius's fingers closed around her wrist, gentle but inexorable. Close your eyes, he murmured. And remember, whatever you see, whatever you feel, I'm here. We're in this together now. Elise closed her eyes. She felt Cassius shift closer, felt his breath, unnecessary for a vampire but habitual, ghost across her skin. Then the sharp, bright pain of fangs piercing her flesh. She gasped, and Cassius's free hand came up to steady her shoulder. The pain transformed almost instantly into something else, a warmth that spread through her veins like honey and starlight. Her head fell back against the couch, and she heard herself make a sound that was half sigh, half moan. Now, Cassius said, his voice rough and strained. He pulled his mouth from her wrist and used one elongated fang to slice open his own palm. Dark blood welled up, almost black in the green firelight. Drink, Elise, quickly, before the wound heals. Elise grasped his hand and brought it to her mouth. The blood tasted like Cassius had described, like a thunderstorm and aged wine, like metal and roses and something wild and free. It burned, but it was a clean burn, like strong spirits. She swallowed once, twice, 3 times. The world exploded into light. Suddenly, she was Cassius, standing in a manor house in 1678, watching his human mother die of plague while he remained untouched, newly turned and unable to save her. She felt his grief, his rage, his terrible helplessness. Then she was Cassius in 1812, feeding on a battlefield, surrounded by the dead and dying of the Napoleonic Wars, disgusted with himself, but unable to stop, the hunger too great. Cassius in 1845, falling in love with a human woman who reminded him of his lost mortality, only to watch her age and wither while he remained frozen. Cassius in 1903, meeting Catherine for the first time. Elise felt the jolt of recognition he'd experienced, the way Catherine's laughter had cut through centuries of cynicism, the way her kindness had made him remember what it felt like to be good. She saw their first kiss, stolen in the library late at night, saw their secret meetings in the gardens, saw the way Cassius had fought against his growing attachment, knowing it could only end in pain. And she saw the night Catherine had told him she was leaving. The confusion on his face, the hurt he'd tried to hide, the gold sovereigns pressed into her hand, the formal dismissal that had broken both their hearts. He hadn't known. He genuinely hadn't known about the pregnancy. The visions shifted, and Elise saw Cassius's search for Catherine. The investigators he'd hired, the magical trackers who had all failed to find her. The binding magic had been too strong, and Catherine had been too clever, hiding in plain sight among the human poor where vampires rarely looked. She saw Cassius's slow acceptance of her loss, the way he'd buried himself in court politics to avoid feeling. The way had kept Catherine's journal as a talisman, the only piece of her he had left. Then the visions reversed, and Elise felt Cassius in her mind, seeing her memories. Her childhood in the charity house, the cold nights and meager meals. The way she'd cared for her younger brother, sacrificing her own needs for his. The first time she'd realized she could see in the dark, the terror and wonder of discovering she was different. Her mother's death, the fever that had burned Catherine from the inside out as the binding magic fought her attempts to speak the truth. Elise had held her hand through the final night, not understanding why her mother kept trying to say a name that wouldn't come. The hard years that followed, the work and struggle, the fierce love for her brother that had kept her going, the loneliness of being different, of never quite fitting in anywhere, and threaded through all of it a strength that surprised even Elise, a core of stubborn determination, inherited perhaps from both parents, that refused to break no matter the circumstances. The visions began to slow, to coalesce into something new. Elise saw the magical structure of her own cells, saw the way vampire and human DNA had woven together in an impossible double helix. The vampire magic should have destroyed the human cells, or vice versa. Instead, they had achieved a perfect balance, each one tempering the other's extremes. She saw the truth written in her very bones. She was exactly what the test claimed: Cassius Thornwood's daughter, Catherine Mercier's child, a hybrid who should not exist, but did, beautifully and impossibly. And she felt Cassius' reaction to that truth. The fear, yes, but also something else. Something that felt like wonder, like hope, like the first thaw after an endless winter. The connection snapped closed suddenly, leaving both of them gasping on the couch. Cassius' hand was still clasped in Elise's, their blood mingling on both their palms. The wounds had already healed, vampire magic accelerating Elise's own hybrid healing. "I believe you," Cassius said, his voice hoarse. "God help us both, but I believe you. You're mine. You're my daughter." Elise looked at him through tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "I saw you," she whispered, "all of you, the good and the terrible." "And?" Cassius asked, and there was fear in his eyes. "Can you stand to be the daughter of a monster?" Elise thought about everything she'd seen. The violence, yes, but also the centuries of loneliness. The political murders, but also the times Cassius had shown mercy when it would have been easier to kill. The coldness he showed the court, but also the warmth he'd given to Catherine, to the few people he'd allowed himself to care for. "You're not a monster," she said finally. "You're a survivor. You've done terrible things to survive in a terrible world. But you've also done good things. You protected the weak when you could. You maintained peace between vampires and humans when others wanted war. You loved my mother, even if you didn't fully understand what that meant." Cassius made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. 300 years old, and I'm being absolved by a 23-year-old girl. "I'm not absolving you," Elise corrected. "I'm accepting you. There's a difference." Something in Cassius's expression shifted then, cracked open. He pulled Elise into an embrace that was careful despite his strength, as though she were made of glass. "I don't know how to be a father," he murmured into her hair. "I don't know how to protect you from what's coming. But I swear on Catherine's memory, I will try." Elise hugged him back, this strange, powerful creature who was her father. He was cold against her, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. They stayed like that for a long moment, two people who had been alone for too long, finding solace in an impossible connection. Finally, Cassius pulled back, wiping at his eyes. "We need to prepare," he said, his voice steadier. "The resonance scan confirmed what I suspected. You're not just a hybrid, Elise. You're a perfect hybrid. The first in recorded history where the two magics have achieved complete harmony." "What does that mean?"